batches. GP allows you to create check, credit card, and EFT payment batches. You're also able to process manual payments to record payments that were processed outside of GP, such as cash or e-transfers. GP includes a wide variety of methods for creating payments for your vendors. Today we'll be looking at entering an invoice with a payment amount directly on the invoice, manual payments, building batch by criteria such as due date or payment priority, batch level payment selection, checking off vendors and specific invoices for them, and creating single payments for a single vendor. As you can see, we have a lot of ground to cover, so let's hop right into Profit's test environment and start processing. Here we are in our test environment. The first thing I'm going to mention about this is that we are on GP 2018 in the test environment. One of the changes that happened in 2018 is that some of these payables windows have changed, so they are a little bit different than what you might be used to. Select Checks has been renamed to Build Payment Batch. Edit Check has been changed to Edit Vendor Payment. These perform the same function, they have just been renamed to reflect the fact that GP allows for more types of payment than checks now. The first type of payment we will be looking at is actually going to be invoice with a check payment on it. So to start keying the invoice, we will go to Transaction Entry. I'm going to tab through the fields here, add a batch. We'll just save it with our defaults. Key in our vendor, give it a unique document number for the invoice, enter a purchase amount, and the payment part. In this case, we can enter a payment type and amount in these boxes in the lower right hand corner. In this case, I am going to fully pay the invoice with a check. Once I've entered the check amount and tab off the field, the check detail window will pop up with information on the payment, including the checkbook ID, the check number, date, and the voucher number of the payment. If we are happy with that, we'll click OK. Looking at the distributions, we'll see that because this is an invoice that is immediately being paid, we will not have any sort of accounts payable distribution. It will go straight from the purchase expense to the cash account. Once I am happy with the information that has been entered on the invoice and the payment, I will print the check with this button in the bottom right hand corner. This brings up the print checks window. It has our check number in it, the check format, and I will click print. In this case, I am just going to print the check to screen, as I do not have a printer to print it to, nor any check stock I would want to print Fabricam payments on. Once you have checked your printer and made sure that the check itself has printed correctly, we can then post the invoice with payment on it. In this case, because I have it saved into a batch, we will need to post the batch instead of the individual transaction. With a batch ID in the batch ID field, we are not able to post this as a transaction. We have to post the batch instead. A quick shortcut to getting to the batch window is the little blue detail arrow beside the batch ID field. Clicking on that will open up our batch entry window. To post the batch, we will need to not have a work transaction open that is saved in that batch. So we will save our transaction and close the window. From here, we can then post. I will cancel all of these reports that we've got, our posting journals, our checkbook register, our distributions, and the GL distributions. And there we go. We have an invoice and a payment that has been posted. Next, we will take a look at manual payments. The manual payment entry window is used to record payments that were processed outside of GP originally. So it can be used to record, say, a handwritten check, an e-transfer, or a credit card payment of an invoice. In fact, this is the traditional way that people have used GP to pay by credit card. Starting a couple versions ago, Microsoft added a new Payables batch type for credit card payments, and we will take a look at that shortly. I won't go through processing an actual manual payment right now. Just be aware that you are able to record checks, cash, credit card payments, and even EFT from the manual payment window. But this will be done without additional processing within GP, such as printing of checks or generating of EFT files. Let's take a look at the new way of processing credit card payments. I'm going to create a batch. I'm going to select the computer check type of batch. Despite the name, this batch type gives 3 payment method options: the traditional check, EFT payments, and credit card payments. For more information on processing EFT payments within GP, please go to the Profit YouTube channel, and there is a previous webinar that has been recorded for information on setting up and processing EFT payments. I'm going to select the credit card type of batch. Down here you'll see instead of having a checkbook, we have a card name. Select the credit card that you are going to use to pay all the vendors in this batch. With the card selected, once we go into transactions, all the payments will be based on that credit card. When I click transactions, I have this go-to window that pops up that asks me which window I want to go to edit the payment. In this case, we'll just quickly take a look at edit vendor payment to see a single payment. With this open, you can see that it enters the batch ID for me, and the credit card is selected for the payment automatically. And then you can continue processing from there. Every payment that you add to this batch will be for the selected credit card. Let's move away from processing single payments and into harnessing the power of GP to build our payment batches for us. In the Build Payment Batch window, I've already created the AP2 batch for Checkbook Uptown Trust. This window can be somewhat intimidating. There are a lot of options, and you can also create a selection of criteria to determine which payments will get built. The criteria here is selected from this drop-down. As you can see, we have a variety of options to filter by: vendor IDs, classes, payment priority, which is set on the vendor master options window, and due date. Due date is the most frequently requested option for building payment batches. When we select it, you can see we can specify our due date that we wish to cut off at. In this case, I am going to do the end of 2016. I know that most of the open payments within the Fabricam company are in 2013, 2014. Apparently, we are not very good at paying our suppliers. Once I have set the desired criteria, click Insert, and it becomes listed here in the restrictions box. You can add multiple criteria, such as limiting yourself to vendors A through D, or with a particular payment priority, such as monthly versus weekly vendors. Below the restrictions box, let's look at a few of the options here. One thing that we warn against is this automatically apply existing unapplied payments, credit notes, and returns. These are selected by default, and what these will do will find any open unapplied payments, credit notes, or returns and apply them to any of the invoices that will get selected by your criteria. Typically, we find that our clients do not wish to do this. If there is an open payment, credit note, or return, it is there for a reason and will be manually applied to a specific invoice. So let's uncheck those. The next option that people often question us about is the option down here to print previously applied documents. What this will be for is that if you manually applied a payment or a credit note in the Apply Payables Documents window, there's no remittance that prints at that time. What this will do is that if there is a remittance waiting to print for a vendor selected by your batch, it will print that remittance as well. Once you are happy with your restrictions and selected options for the payment batch, let's move up into the ribbon bar and click Build Batch. GP will go through your selected options and criteria and begin selecting all of the invoices that those criteria apply to and building our batch. Once it finishes building, the batch total appears just below the batch ID here. You'll also note that the Build Batch button changed to Add to Batch so that you can add additional payments into the batch itself. Where do we go from here? If you look at the bottom right-hand corner, there are 3 buttons. If you are confident that your build batch has correctly selected your payments, you can go directly into printing those payments. Alternatively, we have the Edit Payment Batch or Edit Vendor Payments buttons. These will be shortcuts to the same windows that you see in the Transactions tablet, Edit Payment Batch and Edit Vendor Payment. So I'm going to roll directly into those windows by using the shortcut from the Build Payment Batch window. In the Edit Payment Batch window, you can see we have our batch that we built, and we have a list of all the vendors that have been selected by the Build Payment Batch criteria. If we click on a specific vendor, in the right-hand side of the window, we will see the list of documents that have been selected for payment by the Build Payment Batch. We can edit the batch that has been built by unmarking vendors that we do not wish to pay, or unselecting individual invoices as well. Furthermore, if we wish to add additional vendors into the payment, we can go back and reselect them. Much like the Build Payment Batch window, we have shortcuts in the bottom right hand corner for going into the Printing Payments window or Edit Vendor Payments. Again, this will be going into the same window that we have available in the tablet, and I will just use this shortcut here. Edit Vendor Payment zooms in, so you're looking at a single payment that was selected by our criteria. In this case, we're looking at the payment for advance. If we wish to see the documents applied by it, we can see the apply information behind the apply button. We can look at our distributions, and generally review the payment that has been built. If we are satisfied with the payment that was built, we can simply save it. Now, you don't have to start at the Build Payment Batch window. If you prefer to work within Edit Payment Batch or Edit Vendor Payment, you can absolutely start processing at those steps. In this case, I have a new batch with nothing in it. The Edit Payment Batch window has a list of the vendors on the left-hand side with open documents. Simply scroll through the list, find the vendor you wish to pay, and select them for payment. Much like when we start at the criteria through Build Payment Batch, you can simply mark off the invoices that you wish to pay. Similarly, we can start creating a payment through the Edit Vendor Payment window. I've got another batch in here, selected my vendor, and then I'm going to go to the Apply button in the lower right hand corner. This will give me a list of open documents on the vendor. Mark off the invoices you wish to pay. Your applied and payment amounts will get updated in the Edit Vendor Payment window. From here, you can continue on with printing the payments and posting from there. The last thing we want to take a look at is going to be applying open payments and credit notes in the Apply Payables Documents window. Select your vendor, select your open payment or credit note, and you'll get a list of open invoices that are available to be paid. When you mark the checkbox for one of the invoices, the invoice will be automatically fully applied up to the amount of the open payment. If you wish to change the amount that is applied, you can edit this. In this case, I've changed it to $25 applied. This updates the amount remaining to be the $50.25 less $25, so $25.25 remaining. You can select multiple invoices to be applied by the payment, and once you are done, simply click OK. So there you have a whirlwind tour of vendor payment options within Microsoft Dynamics GP. We took a look at a variety of payment types, building check batches, credit card batches, briefly mentioned the EFT payments, which there is another webinar available for an in-depth look at, and manual payments to record external payments. We also looked at a variety of ways of building the payments themselves, invoicing with the payment amount on it, the manual payments, which can be used to record manual checks, cash payment amounts, and credit cards. We looked at creating batches of the various payment types, including the new way of doing credit card payments. Then we took a look at building a batch by criteria such as due date, payment priority, vendor ID. We rolled into editing the payment batch and also looking at doing a single payment in the edit vendor payment window. So there you have a whirlwind tour of vendor payment options within Microsoft Dynamics GP. We took a look at a variety of payment types, building check batches, credit card batches, briefly mentioned the EFT payments, which there is another webinar available for an in-depth look at, and manual payments to record external payments. We also looked at a variety of ways of building the payments themselves, invoicing with the payment amount on it, the manual payments, which can be used to record manual checks, cash payment amounts, and credit cards. We looked at creating batches of the various payment types, including the new way of doing credit card payments. Then we took a look at building a batch by criteria such as due date, payment priority, vendor ID. We rolled into editing the payment batch and also looking at doing a single payment in the edit vendor payment window.